here right now behind the scenes of the i24 News studios. We're working here, 250 people here and around the world, 150 journalists try to bring you every day the buzz of information. Right now, in a moment, we will get to the newsroom to take a look inside.
Nous sommes maintenant dans les coulisses d'i24 News. 250 personnes travaillent ici et partout dans le monde pour vous informer. 150 journalistes en 3 langues différentes réunis dans une seule et même newsroom. Newsroom que nous allons vous faire visiter dans un instant.
نحن الآن متواجدون وراء كواليس i24 نيوز. هنا يوجد 250 شخصاً يعملون لإحاطتكم ب3 لغات مختلفة و150 إعلامياً سيجعلونكم تعيشون على إيقاع المعلومات من غرفة أخبار واحدة. لنشاهد الاستوديوهات.
Broadcast in 3 different languages, French, English, and Arabic, with teams that work together where everyone debates and brings their knowledge for the sole purpose of giving you, the audience, the best possible information and coverage.
Vous l'avez compris, i24 News, c'est une chaîne en 3 versions, française, anglaise et arabe, dans une seule et même rédaction, où chacun apporte sa sensibilité et sa manière de traiter l'info.
قناة i24 نيوز تبث ب3 لغات، الفرنسية، الإنجليزية والعربية، مع طواقم تعمل سوياً. هنا الجميع يناقش ويخصص معرفته لهدف واحد، وهو نقل أهم المعلومات والتغطيات.
It is now time for us to introduce you to the first edition of the channel, and we leave you with the president of i24 News, Franck Maloul.
Il est maintenant temps pour nous d'aller nous installer en studio pour vous présenter la toute première édition de la chaîne. La parole tout de suite au président d'i24 News, Franck Maloul.
الآن نترككم مع الانطلاقة الأولى لقناة i24 نيوز ورئيسها فرانك ميلور.
It's time for me to officially launch i24 News. I'd like to first pay homage to the teams that have been working for months to allow this channel to become a reality tonight. I'm excited on this historic and emotional moment to bring a new perspective to the international media stage, one of the Israeli society and all its complexity in English, French, and Arabic.
i24 News. Long live i24 News. Longue vie i24 News, et je dis top antenne.
Good evening. This is the i24 News Evening Edition, First Edition. I'm Lossi, Aehrish, and these are the headlines. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu faces stark choice in wake of the EU's directive on settlements, the Panama Canal, a North Korean vessel, and 200,000 sacks of brown sugar. Where do the weapons fit in? And meet the man who, in a small basement in Tel Aviv, brings Holocaust-era violence back to life. Good evening again, and we begin. The European Union's new directive on Israeli settlements sent shockwaves through the Israeli government and caused much outrage. It also leaves the Israeli government and especially Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with a stark choice. i24 News diplomatic correspondent Tal Shalev explains.
The day after the European Union bombshell, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is hoping to delay the formal publication of the new guidelines on the settlements, which are due to be published on Friday.
It's not a question of...
Netanyahu will try to explain to EU leaders that their move will make it harder to return the Palestinians to the negotiation table and will also amplify the voices in Israel who oppose the latest U.S. efforts to revive the peace process.
We will not accept any foreign dictates about our borders. This matter will only be determined through direct negotiations between the two sides.
The EU's new directive is an attempt to pressure the Israeli government, following seemingly endless frustration over Israel's apparent contradictory policies. Netanyahu, on the one hand, voices support for the two-state solution. On the other hand, his government continues to build in settlements. Just today, Israeli planning officials approved construction of hundreds of new homes in the West Bank. Netanyahu's coalition is split on the issue of settlements and peace, and this was clear by the way various ministers reacted to the EU directive. The right wing slammed the decision and are pushing for a counterattack against Europe. The other side of the coalition sees the EU move as a wake-up call for Israel to resume negotiations with the Palestinians before its isolation is complete.
Netanyahu will choose to stand by the settlements. He doesn't want to pay in advance of something which is unclear. Why should he abandon his political camp for some kind of opening of negotiation or some kind of a good look by the European? I don't think he will do that.
Netanyahu now has to decide on the future direction of his government. Will Israel choose peace or settlements? The EU directive has made it clear it cannot choose both.
And joining me right now here in the studio is Tal Shalev, our diplomatic correspondent. Tal, good evening.
Good evening, Lucy.
So is the new EU directive is a diplomatic earthquake? Can we say that?
Well, it definitely sparked a diplomatic firestorm and an unprecedented strain on the Israel and Europe relations. The harsh responses from the Israeli side continued today, all day, together with people trying to analyze the document, this new EU document, and trying to understand what exactly it says. We've obtained a copy of the document, and it's important to explain that the new regulations only apply to the institutions of the European Union itself. They do
institutions of the European Union itself.
Grants coming from institutions of the European Union itself. It does not formally bind all 28 EU member states, but it does serve as a policy recommendation.
Okay.
So it can set a way of thinking that could be, as people have been warning, a slippery slope for Israel, and it has a very symbolic meaning. Another thing that we should know, even though the formal publication is on Friday, the framework, this framework for the EU, it's actually a framework for financing between 2014 to 2020. It only starts at 2014. So actually, Israel has a few months to try and compromise with the EU's and maybe try and get this a better agreement, or not agreement, a better directive from the Israeli side.
So what we heard from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was a very hard response to this decision. What is he going to do now?
Well, yesterday Netanyahu summoned some senior cabinet ministers. He had a very strong, as you said, a very strong response. Today, he's already thinking forward. So Netanyahu intends to speak to Catherine Ashton from the European Union, and the foreign ministry and other ministers have starting to have talks with their European counterparts. They're trying to explain that the timing is so bad because of Kerry's, because of the U.S. Secretary of State, not his visit, but his efforts, because everything that happens is that we're already hearing Israeli voices saying no to any gestures to the Palestinians.
So I believe that we will keep on talking about this issue in the next few days. Tal Shalev, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
And on his sixth visit to the region, as U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry held a series of meetings in Amman today with Arab officials. The focus, his continued effort at restarting Israeli-Palestinian peace talks and gathering essential support from Arab nations. Kerry met with Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas for 5 hours in Amman yesterday. In the background of talks, of course, has been Syria's ongoing civil war and the growing political divide in Egypt. And right now with me, i24 News correspondent Mohammed Najib joins us now live from Ramallah. Mohammed, marhaba.
Marhaba.
So we understand it was a good meeting with the Arab League. And they basically support John Kerry.
Yes, John Kerry has met this afternoon with Nabil Al-Arabi, the head of the Arab League, and they insisted that if Israel agreed to the Arab peace initiative, then they should recognize the security of Israel, and this will be backing and support for President Abbas to go back to the negotiations with Israel.
So do you think that we heard that Kerry maybe will announce new negotiations before he's flying back on Friday?
Yes, U.S. sources as well as Palestinian sources told me that Kerry is determined to come to Jerusalem and to meet with the President Abbas in Ramallah on a Friday and to announce the resumptions of the Palestinian-Israeli talks before his departure to the United States.
And like we said, basically Arab League have been backing up Kerry for these new talks.
Yes, he went to Amman and met with Nabil Al-Arabi and with other foreign ministers and asked them to support Abbas, to encourage him to go back to the negotiations, and to also at the same time to convince Israel if it is agreed to a peace agreement, then it will have peace with 22 Arab countries, which could be an encouraging reason.
In your opinion, how optimistic should we be?
I see that the atmosphere this time is more optimistic because Abbas is expected to return this evening to Ramallah. He will call for a meeting for Fatah Central Committee. Tomorrow he is going to meet with PLO Executive Committee and the leaders of the Palestinian factions to tell them about Kerry initiative and to consult with them. This never happened unless if there is something important, as when Abbas has decided to go to the United Nations in 29 November 2012. So this is a good sign that there is progress and there is an infiltration, there is something worthy.
Mohammed Najib from our correspondent, i24 News correspondent from Ramallah, thank you very much for this, and we hope to be optimistic, of course. And now to Egypt, where a new interim government has been sworn in with Army General Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, who led the ousting of Mohamed Morsi, named Deputy Prime Minister and Defense Minister. The army says it's fulfilling the demands of the people, while thousands of protesters march through Cairo against the new cabinet. i24 News correspondent Danny Swibel tells us more about the chaos still gripping the largest and most powerful Arab country.
The new government has no portfolios occupied by any figures from the Islamist parties. A spokesman for the Muslim Brotherhood said it will not take part and called the interim government illegitimate. The swearing-in ceremony of General El-Sisi was shown live on state television, further antagonizing pro-Morsi protesters. El-Sisi became the deputy prime minister as well as defense minister, further intensifying opponents' view that the July 3rd removal of Morsi was in fact a military coup. The previous days had seen renewed violence between those in the Morsi camp and the Egyptian police. 7 were killed, 261 injured, and over 400 arrested. The clashes came as senior U.S. envoy William Burns visited Egypt, saying it had been given a second chance at democracy. Burns also stressed the need to end violence and move towards a democratically elected government. But despite his pleas, Burns was snubbed by the rival groups, including Morsi's Muslim Brotherhood, who believe America supported the military move, which saw the president deposed. The interim government, led by Adli Mansour, has announced a plan to amend the Constitution and set a timetable for new elections. But Morsi supporters do not seem convinced as they continue their drive to reverse this new military-inspired revolution.
And joining us now on the phone from Cairo is Hiba Abu Saif. Hiba, marhaba. Hiba?
Hi, marhaba.
Hello.
Yes,
so you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so Hiba, you're right now in Cairo. Can you tell us what is happening right now in the streets of Cairo?
You know, the people who supporting Morsi are making very problems right now in Cairo streets. here and there. But let me tell you that not only our military is standing for them, the people also, the people of Egypt also stand against those supporters for Morsi.
Do you think, Hiba, do you think that really it is the will of the people? Are we talking about the army says that he's fulfilling the demands of the people? Is this really what the people want?
Well, let me tell you that the majority of our people here in Egypt are very supporting to the military, and the military is supporting the people. So it's almost the same here in Egypt. In case we have some problem from these supporters for Morsi, and the military is not present in this location, the people are calling the military, and they also control this problem as soon as they can. Tell the military come and control these people. So here in Egypt, we and the military, we are the same one. We are not afraid of our military, or as you know that they say all the time that the military want to control our country and all this stuff. This is not true at all.
Hiba Abu Saif, thank you very much for this phone call, for this conversation with us. And we continue with the Panamanian officials thought they were detaining a ship carrying illegal drugs. Instead, they uncovered hundreds of thousands of tons of undeclared Cuban weaponry headed to North Korea. I24 News correspondent Danny Swibel takes us through this major sea bust.
The vessel, called Chung Chon Gang, left Russia's Far East and traveled across the Pacific Ocean before entering the Panama Canal. UN sanctions banned most supplies of military equipment to Pyongyang, so it was alleged that Cuba was its stated destination. The ship's suspicious actions, such as disappearing off the radar, led Panamanian officials to board it. They expected to find illicit drugs there. But hidden underneath several 100,000 tons of sugar, the officials, led by no less than Panama's president himself, found instead a large supply of Cuban undeclared military cargo.
We will open up the cargo to friends, probably the United Nations, United States, England, but a country that has the capacity to work out what is in the containers.
Cuba confirmed that it had indeed sent over 240 tons of defensive weapons to the North Koreans, including 2 anti-aircraft missile complexes and even 2 fighter planes. But they stressed that the weapons were obsolete, over 5 decades old, and was sent out strictly for repair and was meant to be returned to Cuba.
We're going out for a break, and right after it, as anger in the U.S. still flares over the Zimmerman verdict, a look back at the country's racial history, and meet the man who, in a small basement in Tel Aviv, brings Holocaust-era violence back to life.
It's about hearing all the voices.
C'est pas mon rôle de tirer des conclusions. وظيفتي طرح الأسئلة اللي ما طرحوها الناس على أنفسهم من قبل.
We are going to educate 40 girls.
It's about looking for all angles.
Le travail, c'est d'abord d'être à l'écoute de toutes les voix, de toutes les sensibilités.
It's about knowing the bigger picture.
To expose different voices that make you look at the world in a different way.
It's about telling the whole story.
The way you frame a story makes all the difference.
It's about time for I24 News. I24 News brings you world news from the heart of the Middle East.
C'est sans doute le meilleur endroit pour décoder et analyser l'actualité internationale.
3 channels, 3 languages.
Make you look at the world in a different way.
English, French, Arabic. 24 hours a day.
Shalom. I'm asking you to choose that future.
Uncompromising journalism with a fresh voice and a fair perspective.
You have to constantly question your own.
Welcome back. 1.8 million. That's the number of people displaced by the fighting in Syria. According to Antonio Guterres, UN High Commissioner for Refugees, this is the biggest refugee crisis in 18 years since the Rwandan genocide. More in this following story.
The holy month of Ramadan represents tradition and family gathering for millions of people around the world. But this year, many are celebrating far from home and away from family. These are the Syrian refugees, a largely neglected outcome of the country's ongoing civil war. The United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees said today that the Syrian refugee situation is the worst since the Rwandan genocide in the 1990s.
This crisis has been going on for much longer than anyone had feared, with unbearable humanitarian consequences. The people of Syria continue to suffer tremendously, a suffering that is now further aggravated by the hot summer temperatures and particularly distressing during these holy months of Ramadan.
More than 1.8 million refugees are located in Lebanon, Turkey, Jordan, and other countries in the world. Every day, around 6,000 people are added to that number. The refugees have to face enormous obstacles in their new life. Overcrowding in camps and lack of food and medicine are just some of the problems.
The difference is big between Syria and here. Our situation is so bad here, more than you can imagine. Excuse me, but is this a dinner for a fasting person? Believe me, I have got spots on my face from sadness. I swear we are sleeping and waking up with no proper nutrition. We have no energy.
But while the cannons are still roaring in Syria, the refugees can only hope for a better Ramadan next year.
1.8 million, yes. In Lebanon, militants assassinated a well-known supporter of Syrian President Bashar al-Assad early this morning, in the latest sign that the Syrian conflict is spreading. Mohammed Dirar Jamo, a commentator who worked for Syrian state media and has often appeared on Arab TV channels, was shot by gunmen outside his house. Only yesterday, a Hezbollah convoy was targeted by a car bomb. Together, the two attacks suggest a targeting of President Assad's allies in Lebanon. And in Italy today, the trial of Francesco Schettino got underway. Schettino, dubbed as the Captain Coward in the media, became the subject of anger and embarrassment when wiretapped calls revealed he abandoned his sunken cruise ship during evacuations. i24 News reporter Charles Biblitzer has the story.
The trial of Francesco Schettino, captain of the Costa Concordia cruise ship, which capsized off Italy's coast last year, began Wednesday. The giant Concordia crashed outside the Tuscan port of Giglio in January 2012 after it struck rocks during a maneuver that brought it into shallow waters. The tragic event, which garnered global attention and put the cruise industry's safety standards into question, killed 32 people. Captain Schettino, who left the ship before all its crew and passengers had been rescued, faces charges including multiple manslaughter and abandoning ship. His lawyer, however, has called for people to not jump to conclusions.
Our intention is the same as it has been from the beginning, which is to ascertain the truth in the most complete way possible. And this will be useful also to be able to understand what his real responsibility should be. He has never shied away from his responsibilities, but it is only fair that he is treated justly with the responsibility of a captain. This is something we have been very clear about. He was the captain, but it is the right that for certain things he should be the point of reference, but it is not right to blame him for responsibilities that he did not have.
If found guilty, Schettino could face up to 20 years in prison.
Also in court today in Cleveland, Ariel Castro, the man charged with kidnapping and raping 3 women, holding them captive in his home for over a decade. The story has captivated the U.S. since the women were freed in early May. Just last week, the women released a video on YouTube thanking people for their support. Castro faced arraignment today on 977 counts, included aggravated murder of fetus and rape and assault. Riots have broken out in India's eastern state of Bihar after at least 22 children died and dozens more were taken ill from eating a tainted school meal. More on this story, on this ongoing story, in the following report.
The rage of parents whose children were poisoned by public school meals yesterday in eastern India has translated into rioting in the streets of the town of Chhapra. Crowds smashed police booths and pelted stones at a police bus. The protests follow the poisoning of over 50 children under the age of 12 and some school staff who fell sick after eating the free school lunch. 21 people have already died, and there are fears the death toll could rise since some of the children hospitalized are in critical condition. India's midday meal scheme provides free food to about 120 million children to try to boost attendance, but has often suffered from poor hygiene. A senior local education official said that it is suspected that the Bihar poisoning was caused by insecticides in vegetable or rice. A probe into the case has been launched, and a compensation of 200,000 rupees, or about $3,400 has already been offered to the families of each of the victims.
And going back to the U.S., George Zimmerman's acquittal continues to raise hard questions about race and the American justice system. But the debate between black and white in the U.S. has a long history of clashes, protests and bloodshed. i24 News reporter Uri Shapira looks into the heart of one of America's biggest conflicts.
LA streets have seen better days. They've also seen much worse. Our short memories sometimes mislead us to believe that the current tension between blacks and whites began when George Zimmerman walked out of court a free man. The truth is that the roots of this conflict go back to the 19th century and perhaps even beyond. The American Civil War in 1865 led to the end of slavery, but out of the new situation, a different battle began. In 1865, 6 Civil War veterans from Tennessee formed the notorious far-right organization, the Ku Klux Klan, that target African Americans, sometimes even lynching them. In 1954, Rosa Parks, a black woman from Montgomery, refused to sit in the back of the bus, despite city laws, and opened the gate for the black civil rights movement. 12 years later, clashes were sparked in the same town after a rally led by one of the biggest icons of civil rights movement, Dr. Martin Luther King.
But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land.
One protester died in that rally and pushed the country into a new era. Some of the worst rioting in American history took place in Los Angeles, the infamous Watts riots. African Americans who opposed racial segregation started a riot that got out of hand and caused the death of 35 people. For many, the tail end of the 60s symbolized the end of innocence in the US. Riots spread to New York, Chicago, and Detroit. The assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King in 1968 was another landmark that brought the tension to new heights. The following decades were considerably calmer until 1992, when the anger returned to Los Angeles. A young black man named Rodney King, who was brutally beaten by police, broke the delicate balance between authorities and citizens, who felt betrayed once again after the offender was acquitted in court.
Can we all get along? Can we get along?
21 years later, Americans are still furious over racial discrimination and injustice. And when history repeats itself, America can only look back in anger.
Look back and learn, look back and study. History repeats itself, yes. And now we have exclusive video from the manufacturing line of aeronautics of one of Israel's unmanned aerial vehicle suppliers just outside of Tel Aviv. Most of these UAV operations are kept in the dark, but it's a known fact that the Israeli UAV industry is the biggest exporter in the world, both for military and civilian uses. And of course, we will have more from this behind the scenes.
Lately, in the last 10 years, I think it is becoming also common in the other forces, like in Afghanistan and in Iraq, which is true, but yet the intensive and the longest period of operating and the experience that we have accumulated in the last 25 years, there is no one in the world who has the same experience as we have.
So we're sorry about that. We will have more from behind the scenes of the Israeli UAV industry tomorrow at 9:40 p.m. in the Defense Weekly magazine here at I24 News. And for over 23 years, Rabbi Abraham Skorka and Cardinal George Mario Bergoglio of Buenos Aires have been best friends. The friendship continued when Bergoglio became Pope Francis. Journalist Enrique Zimmerman recently spent a few days at the Vatican and got a unique look inside this special friendship.
It was not easy to cross the Swiss Guard checkpoints. However, finally we managed to get in to the new home of the Pope. Suddenly, the doors opened.
How are you? What a pleasure. Welcome.
Thank you so much.
Pope Francis, it's a pleasure to meet you.
Thanks for coming with my friend. We have worked so much together.
Many years, isn't it?
Yes, so many years. It's a pleasure.
We are all coming from Israel.
Thank you very much.
The idea is to send a message to Israel.
Well, our friendship is an example that dialogue is possible, and friendship is possible. This is the message.
This is the best message that we can convey to Israel. And may God bless Israel with peace. And may Rome and Jerusalem join together in peace.
The Pope and Rabbi went to have lunch together, but suddenly the head of the Catholic Church comes back.
Please forgive me. I thought you were leaving, and he just told me that you were staying. So please come and have lunch. These are simple vicar's habits.
That was a small, brief introduction to the story we will be running in our Insight magazine on 9:40 after us. Every once in a while, we encounter a story quite unlike any other. That is the case with Amnon Weinstein. In a small basement in central Tel Aviv, Amnon breathed life into musical instrument with a tragic history. I24 News correspondent Shachar Peled takes us inside his extraordinary line of life.
Isaac Stern, when they asked him why Jewish people are playing the violin, he said because it's the most easy instrument to pick up and to run away.
Amnon Weinstein has a unique line of work. Over the years, he has located and restored violins that belonged to Holocaust victims, then brought them to be played in orchestras all over the world.
I was hooked by the subject, and then I had a talk on the radio, and I asked for stories. And you know what is a snowball? 1 violin, 2 violins, 3 violins. Today we have 46 instruments in this project from different stories. All these violins that we are restoring, we are putting them in a condition to play in concert hall. And then we understood the power when you are talking music and Holocaust. It's easier to people to accept, to listen.
His personal history is interwoven with the Holocaust as he mourns the loss of hundreds of his extended family.
The Germans took care of it, all of them. My sister once have done a calculation. If she arrived to 360, 380 people, you know, Jewish family, this was a tribe.
Hidden in a basement in central Tel Aviv, Amnon's workshop is a world of its own. He pays tribute to Holocaust victims through his work and believes this is the best way to remember them and continue their legacy.
There are violins that people played in the Holocaust, but we don't know their names. We don't have any information. Reason is, the Germans use this musician, like the orchestra in Auschwitz, that played, and in the morning, in the evening, when all these prisoners were going to work and coming back. Beside this famous sign, Arbeit macht frei, 500 meters from there was a kind of a wall, and they were playing there. This is a violin that is coming from the Auschwitz orchestra. It's completely restored now.
A year ago, Amnon received an unusual delivery. As he opened the old violin sent to him from the United States, he couldn't believe his eyes.
This was an amateur, because this is a very simple violin, very low quality. And he went to the local violin maker, and the guy, without to tell